HARK, we are here. It is time for yet another episode of Regroup Phase. We're dropping this on a Tuesday for various different reasons. Some are obvious, some not so much. We're going to cover some previews. This should be fun. Let's get right to it. Our first preview comes by way of Unlimited FFG Socials. This dropped on Tuesday of last week. It is our second to last leader in Shadows of the Galaxy. We already know who this is. Let's find out what he does. This is Han Solo, worth the risk. Aggression, heroism, underworld leader, action, exhaust. Play a unit from your hand. It costs 1 less. Deal 2 damage to it. On 5, you flip into a 3/6. This is a common. Number 13 at a 262 in SHD. Unit side, Underworld trait 3/6. Action, play a unit from your hand. It costs 1 less, deal 2 damage to it. Han Solo takes a huge risk when deploying units. Everything you want to play, basically your entire curve can come in 1 earlier than it normally does, but effectively you got to pay 2 damage onto the unit in order to do so. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's not so much. You want to throw an Ezra onto the board on round 1, you got to pay the price of putting 2 damage onto your Ezra. There are interesting ways of making this work. You have to try to make sure that you're focusing at least on units that have 3 health or more, and that's something that is viable to actually be ready to attack on the next turn it comes out, or the next turn it attacks. Actually, interestingly enough, you could do something like play an R2-D2 for free, putting 2 damage on him, and then playing a 3PO the same round to get that extra card on your hand. So a very similar play to what the cunning Han Solo can do, but in aggression and a little bit earlier, or technically on the same track, but just in a different manner. Then on the flip side, the most interesting aspect about Han Solo is that this is not a once per round action. You just can continue to do it. So if you have the resources, you can play multiple things. And if you really pay attention to it, playing a unit from your hand, it costs 1 less. All of your 1-cost units are free. They just have to survive. So that's a very interesting way to be able to present threats with Han Solo. When we go into the aspect reviews later on, we can definitely check out how this works with specifically in aggression. But as it stands right now, this is a very threatening leader, and a 3/6 on 5. Han might be your hyper aggressive aggression deck. You can potentially run double aggression here and just throw as many units into your opponent as you possibly can, playing something that either comes out for free and takes a little bit of damage and can survive, and then follow up with something like a Benthic 2 tubes, or even a 2-cost, because if you can drop something for free, you drop it for free, and then try to continue putting that pressure on your opponent with some of the other stuff we've seen before and some of the stuff that we're going to see here later on, including a bonkers new event that fits this guy perfectly. Next up, we have 2 previews by the Jade podcast. Link in the description below to their previews. We've got a unit, we've got an upgrade. Both are really cool. Let's check out the unit to start. We have here Lurking Tai Phantom, a 3-cost cunning villainy space unit, 2 power, 2 health, Imperial Vehicle Fighter, Raid 2, so a 4/2 on attacks. This unit cannot be captured, damaged, or defeated by enemy card abilities. This is an uncommon, number 187 out of 262 in SHD. This is an absolutely amazing cunning space unit. This is probably going to get piled into all of those decks that you want to put there. I don't know that it's necessarily a replacement for 7th Fleet Defender. It's likely just an additional space unit that you can use in those decks. But ideally, you get this on the board. It's mostly protected from things that are going to get it. Your opponent has to attack it directly in order to be able to pull it off the board or return it to your hand. It can be exhausted, but it can't be captured with all the capture effects from this set. It can't be damaged with any of the direct damage abilities that come from any card ability, and it cannot be defeated, so it's protected from most sources of removal, which is fantastic. Lurking Tai Phantom, a 4 attack into your opponent's base or any of your opponent's units. Really cool if you can throw an extra shield onto him. It's going to be an absolute bonkers unit to be able to play. This is going to be the premier cunning villainy space unit in most cunning villainy space decks, and I am very excited to see how people get this used and how often this ability on the bottom here trips people up during gameplay. The second preview is an upgrade. It is something that's referenced in Empire Strikes Back, but the image is from A New Hope. We have here Deathmark, a 2-cost aggression upgrade. Attached unit gains bounty, draw 2 cards, +0/+0 bounty condition, a common, number 176 out of 262 in SHD. HD. Deathmark is here as a cheap upgrade that you can throw onto your opponent's units as cheap card draw, so long as you can defeat those units, hopefully within the same round. If you're throwing this onto a 2 health unit in a boss deck, using Dengar and then boss to be able to ping that unit off, it's super easy. Throw this onto a stolen land speeder you played on your opponent, and you just get all kinds of extra stuff. And late game, if you throw this onto a unit and your boss is out, and you get to defeat the unit that has this on it, you're drawing 4 cards, so long as you haven't used the ability previously in the phase. This is really cool. This is another one in a sequence of 2 cost bounties that are pretty cool and basically single aspect across the board. Lots of bounties, lots of upgrades. We're getting close to finishing the set to be able to evaluate how all of these abilities work, and that'll be something fun to do down the line. But as it stands right now, Deathmark, pretty good. On Tuesday, June 18th, Xander presented us a FFG live stream featuring Gamegenic products with the CEO of Gamegenic. I apologize, I do not remember the individual's name, but we got one preview, as Xander likes to put out at least one preview on each stream that comes out. And this event that was showcased to us is another just bonkers event. We have here Evacuate, a 6-cost cunning tactic event. Return each non-leader unit to its owner's hand. A legendary, number 233 out of 262 in SHD. You can see the people scurrying away as the Star Destroyers are leveling this city, although with this much damage, these people would not survive. Evacuate is basically a board waylay. You pay twice as much as you would for a waylay, but it returns everything that's a non-leader unit on the board. Sometimes that can be really good, save some of your units from taking any extra damage or being eliminated if they're key pieces to your strategy. You can throw all of your opponent's cards back into their hand and make them suffer. In addition to that, this actually works pretty well with the card we saw in the last preview set, where you deal damage to your opponent based upon how many cards they have in their hand. If you evacuate their board back, it can be nasty. And there are certain strategies in this game that this card can do that. The combination can do that on 7 instead of 9. So Evacuate is a very good card by itself, but can also serve as combo potential for either getting resources back into your hand that you can do later, or a smuggled card that you smuggled out that you want to get back into your hand for its effect. You can play it directly from your hand from that point. Lots of different interesting strategies you can use with Evacuate, but ideally this is a board wipe that you want to throw at your opponents and stall them out for at least another couple of rounds while they reset up their forces on their board, and hopefully you can take advantage of the time given to you to be able to eliminate what your opponent can do. Next up, we have another unlimited FFG Socials preview. This is individual that's in the Palace of Jaba the Hut. You see him in a couple of images in the background in Return of the Jedi. Very interesting card design here. Link in the description below to the preview. Let's check it out. We have here Ephant Mon, Head of Security. Didn't actually know that. 5-cost command villainy ground unit, 4 power, 6 health, underworld trait. On attack, choose an enemy non-leader unit that attacked your base this phase. A friendly unit in the same arena captures that unit. This is a rare, number 88 out of 262 in SHD. So command gets another one of those choose a units. That unit captures an opposing unit. Super simple. A lot of these seem to have certain restrictions. I believe the one that we saw early on, the green command event, required you to capture something with the same cost or less. This requires you to capture something that has attacked your base this turn. Or this phase. So you're not going to be able to defend yourself against your opponent's aggressive plays, but you are going to be able to at least stop them from doing it for at least another round, because when it comes back, your opponent's unit is no longer ready. It is exhausted, because everything returns to play exhausted unless it says otherwise. This is an interesting card. 5 cost is a little expensive on the side that it does, but if you can get it in there, either ambushing it or attack on a round when you're prepared to attack, you can end up capturing your opponent's units. And there's a card later, there's a couple different cards, but there's a card later that can really help deal with that. And if you're comboing this with Dryden Voss, you can just play the unit you have captured with Ephant Mon. Next up, we have 2 previews coming by way of Roll for Crit. Link in the description below. We have another double single aspect unit and then a single morality aspect event that is going to be very powerful and very useful. Let's start with the unit. We have here Enterprising Lackeys. This is a 4-cost double command ground unit, 5 power, 5 health, underworld trait. When defeated, you may defeat a friendly resource. If you do, put this unit into play as a resource. This has a smuggle cost of 6 with 2 command, a rare, number 107 out of 262 in SHD. D. Enterprising Lackeys is an okay unit, 5/5 for 4 Underworld trait. It mixes with those other Underworld cards. But ideally, what you're trying to do is use this unit to race into getting your resources for other things, to be able to do those bigger things like drop a Devastator, drop a Finalizer, drop Endless Legions, things like that. Because this effectively can refill itself every time. You drop it for 4, you attack into something, clear it off the board, kill itself, you defeat one of your own resources and put it into play, so it does replace whatever you did defeat. But then you smuggle this out for 6, which drops another resource from the top, and then you just repeat that cycle over and over. So you have to invest into getting it killed first to start the loop. But eventually, once you do it enough times, you can end up defeating, utilizing it to continue bringing you some resources. And it is unfortunately an every other round thing, because you're not going to be able to ambush this every single time. You could probably ambush it the first time, but anyone thereafter, so far as we know, we don't really have any ambush from smuggle, I don't think, as of yet. But Enterprising Lackeys is designed to just be a 5/5 that you continually recur in order to be able to continue getting your resources and moving you forward. And there's another unit we're going to see later on that also does that, but differently, and that's going to be very interesting. But as it stands, Enterprising Lackeys, very interesting choice for that double command. Push as many resources, ramp as hard as you possibly can, always be ramping. The second preview is an event that deals with captured units. We have here Altering the Deal, 1-cost villainy trick event. Discard a captured card guarded by a friendly unit. A rare, number 243 out of 262 in SHD. Vader doing the pointing at Lando, who shirks away in fear. Altering the Deal basically says, if you've captured a unit, discard it. That is really good. If you capture a unit, your opponent has 1 turn to get that unit back. Otherwise, it's gone. Obviously, we've seen combos with Dryden Boss that allow you to play a unit that you have captured, but Altering the Deal is a super cheap thing. You just capture something and then altering the deal to get rid of it so that your opponent can't get it back. And then they're just SOL with the things that you have. This is a very strong card that I kind of wish wasn't a morality aspect. I wish it would have been more style. So command, vigilance, cunning, aggression, but I understand why they chose to stick it with villainy, because they're the ones that would be either willing to kill or sacrifice their own captured stuff, whereas heroism would probably be more focused on rescuing their stuff. So great card. I think this is going to see a lot of play initially, especially if you're focused on doing capture in villainy, and then again, as capture wanes off, we'll see less and less and less of it. Our next preview is a continuation of the FFG Socials double single aspect legendary card. We've got Vigilance here, a legendary, an upgrade. Let's check it out. We have here Second Chance, a 4-cost double Vigilance upgrade attached to a non-leader unit. Attached unit gains when defeated for this phase. This unit's owner may play it from their discard pile for free. +0/+0 Gambit. This is a legendary, number 53 out of 262 in SHD. Second Chance gives you an opportunity to redeploy a unit if it dies in the same phase. Your opponent can get around this by killing whatever is on this after you have claimed, if they have the ability to do so, or just defeating the upgrade, then defeating your actual units. There's going to be some upgrade hate that floats around in this set. There's definitely some good upgrade hate we've seen before. This can get bamboozled, this can get confiscated, this can get power failure, this can get disabling Fang Fightered, and that's just stuff from SOR. I don't think this is going to be an incredibly strong card, but it might be an interesting, just single copy mainboard or sideboard tech, just in case you think you're going to be able to try to keep something, or your opponent isn't going to be fast enough to defeat your units or to defeat the upgrade and the unit in the same phase. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But as it stands, second chance at life for some units in the game. Next up, we've got 2 previews from a Spanish channel. I'm going to screw this up and I apologize in advance, but I believe it's Les Cartes sur Table. Again, I apologize. Just call me uncultured. 2 previews, both very good cards. Both I'm very excited to see. Let's start with the event. We have here Daring Raid. This is a 1-cost aggression tactic event. Deal 2 damage to a unit or base. This is a common, number 178 out of 262 in SHD. Bo-Katan, Koska Reeves, Fennec Shand, great art, fantastic job here. We got Shock, folks. If you don't know what Shock is a spell in red in Magic. That's 1 cost, deal 2 damage to basically any target. Daring Raid does the same thing. 2 to a unit, 2 to a base, whatever you want to do, pop with Daring Raid. This goes into every single aggression deck that wants to be able to be doing damage, and effectively you're basically just going to be using this to pop damage to your opponent's base. 3 copies of this deal 6 damage to your opponent's base. If your opponent's a 30 health base, you're a sixth of the way there. If your opponent has a 25 health base, you're just above a fifth of the way there. Absolutely insane card. With all the other damage things we've seen, the space unit, the reckless gunslinger, all the other cards that we know that already do damage to your opponent's base, like Sabine, this is gonna be nuts. Absolutely nuts. Just genuinely, yeah. Next up, we have a space unit from the same previewers. This is also a very good card. We have the Arquetan's Assault Cruiser. This is the same thing as Gideon's Assault Cruiser. It's the light cruiser, basically. 8 cost command space unit. 7 power, 8 health, vehicle capital ship, ambush, that's important. When this unit attacks and defeats a non-leader unit, put the defeated unit into play as a resource under your control. This is a rare, number 122 out of 262 in SHD. If your opponent is not running space units, this card isn't very good. It's still a 7 health beater in space. If it's not able to kill things in space, you're not going to be able to get full use of this effect. But if your opponent is running space units, this is now just a bunch of stuff that feeds Endless Legion. And every time it destroys something, you get a resource towards Endless Legion. And the further you go into that, and the more units you steal from your opponent to be able to do so, the more value Endless Legions gets for you in the long run. This is basically the enabler for that strategy. And every player has to decide if they're going to even bother with space seeing this on the board, because take down a Falcon, take down a Fet's Fire Spray, take down one of those fancy Raider cruisers, Ruthless Raiders, there we go. If you can use something else to get some health down on your opponent's big Star Destroyer, like an Avenger or a Devastator or a Finalizer, and use this to finish it off, even if that's all it does, that getting thrown into your resource row to be able to Endless Legions later, just absolutely crazy. This card is nuts. I love it. I love the fact that space has now become an important lane within the game because of this and because of that strategy. And honestly, even without Endless Legions, just ramping yourself by killing things, super good. Super good. Next up, we've got a creature coming by way of unlimited FFG socials, link in the description below. This guy's pretty wild. We have here the Wild Rancor, a 6 cost double aggression ground unit, 6 power, 8 health creature, Overwhelm. When played, deal 2 damage to each other ground unit. This is a rare, number 158 out of 262 in SHD. Wild Rancor comes down, deals a ton of damage to everything on the board, except for itself. Clears out all the little weenies that are on the board. Clears out shields if your opponent has any of them on the board. That's specifically for ground units, not space units, obviously. And then you can just attack into things and start eating them with the Overwhelm. This guy's got 8 health, so he's going to survive for a while. He's not really susceptible to any of the bigger removal pieces like Takedown or Force Choke. Will die to Rival's Fall and Vanquish, but it may have been able to do its job on its when played from that point on. It's a fancy card. I like it. It's easy. It's simple. You throw it down, you deal the damage, and you start chomping on your opponent's units as you go through, which is really, really good. Next up, we have 2 previews by way of TCG Talk. Link in the description below to their preview. We've got an event. We've got a unit. I'm super excited for this unit, so let's check out the unit first. We have here Super Commando Squad, 5 cost, Vigilance Villainy ground unit, 4 power, 4 health, Imperial Mandalorian Trooper, shielded, so when it comes into play, you put a shield token on it. While this unit is upgraded, it gains Sentinel. This is a common, number 34 out of 262 in SHD. First of all, art off the hook. Kyle, fantastic work here. Love this art. Very good at drawing Mandalorians, Kyle is, because he did the This Is the Way art, which was also absolutely incredible. 5 costs, 4/4, not super great. However, there are lots of different things that this thing does that works with a bunch of different strategies all at once. You can give it Sentinel by putting an upgrade onto it, so that's easy enough. This thing wants to see upgrades if you're playing Gar Saxon. This thing also comes with a built-in upgrade because when it comes into play, you put a shield on it. A shield is an upgrade. So right off the bat, this is actually a 4/4 Sentinel that can't be damaged the first time it takes damage. It loses Sentinel after that point, but hopefully you'll have another upgrade that you can play onto it, or another shield, or throw an experience token on it, so that way this remains a Sentineled unit. This is a fantastic mid-game drop for the Gar-Saxon strategy, because then this eventually becomes a 5/4 when it comes into play because of that shield, because it gives it an upgrade, and then you get all sorts of other power and health shenanigans based upon whatever it is you can do with it. Super Commando Squad is an absolutely incredible card. It's going to be very fun to see, and it's a common, so this is also actually going to be very good in limited, because you're going to see it often, and if you can get a bunch of these, or even 2 of them, they're going to put in some work, because it is difficult to bypass Sentinels without constructed level tech. Basically just drawing with whatever you can, and that's how it works. So Super Commando Squad, very good card, very exciting. The next card is an event that potentially supports the Super Commando Squad. We have here Evidence of the Crime. This is a 3-cost Vigilance trick event. Take control of an upgrade that costs 3 or less and attach it to an eligible unit of your choice. This is a rare, number 77 out of 262 in SHD. Again, much like the Super Commando Squad, this does a couple of different things. This is upgrade removal on anything that costs 3 or less. This is upgrade enabler on you if you need to get an upgrade onto something that doesn't have one. And it's also upgrade transfer, because you can target one of your own upgrades, you just take control of it again, and shift it over to something else if you need to. If something you have is going to die or doesn't need that upgrade and you want to shift it over, boom, done. This also actually backs up the Finn strategy, because you can Evidence of a Crime one of your opponent's upgrades to your units, and then use Finn to get rid of it, so that way you can put a shield on. Pretty interesting event here. Like I said, it does multiple things. There's a lot of different ways to use it. I imagine most of what's going to happen is that you basically want to steal one of your opponent's upgrades and just go from there on out. Or you could potentially take an entrench that's on one of your units and throw it onto one of your opponent's units, making them not be able to attack your base rather than the other way around. Interesting card here. Upgrade cost is a little expensive, but I think it will be viable in the sideboard, especially if you're going up against a lot of upgrade stuff. This again also can throw a bounty from one of your units to one of your opponent's units. Lots of different things you can do with this. The options are unlimited. Next up, 2 previews. Again, lots of double previews. That's fantastic for all the lovely creators out there. Coming by way of Star Wars Unlimited.gg. Link in the description below to their article. We've got 2 units here, a space unit and a ground unit. And the space unit is one of my favorite types of space ships in Star Wars. So let's start with that one. We have here the Privateer Sick, a 2-cost cunning space unit, 2 power, 2 health, fringe vehicle fighter. While you control another cunning unit, this unit gains shielded. This is a common, number 212 out of 262 in SHD. Love this vehicle. This is the starter spaceship for the neutral pilot path in Star Wars Galaxies. There's also a heavier version of this that you can use later on, specifically because a lot of people liked this design. I like it a lot as well. We've already seen the Cartel Spacer, which actually does something very similar to it. You have to control another cunning unit in order to be able to get its effect. But rather than tap down something your opponent controls, this privateer unit wants to get a shield, which can be really good, especially if you're going with a lower to the, not lower to the ground, but lower cost curve for your stuff. On a round 1, you can play a 1-cost or potentially a 2-cost cunning unit, and then on round 2 you play your privateer here, which will give itself the shield as long as that other unit was a cunning unit. It's super chill space unit. This is again another very good limited play. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that can definitely get you shielded if you play it mid-ish game. But even if you don't, a 2/2 in space, not terrible, especially at common. You might see a bunch of these in your drafts and your sealed events. Go ham. The second preview is a unit we expected to see in the first set, but the reason why it's in the second set will become apparent very quickly. We have here Cassian Andor, Rebellions Are Built on Hope, 3-cost Aggression Heroism ground units, 3 power, 5 health, Rebel trait, Smuggle for 5 aggression and heroism, and when played using Smuggle, ready this unit. This is an uncommon, number 148 out of 262 in SHD. Cassian is here to shoot some blasters and knock some people out. A very good unit to play on 3 by itself with 3/5 as its stats, but on 5 that's a little bit under curve. However, because it comes into play ready, it can attack immediately. This combos very well with Cassian's leader ability and then his leader unit ability. As long as you can do the 3 damage, you get to draw that card once per round. But Cassian himself can also be, as part of Rebel strategy, gain bonuses from Rebels. You can Metal Ceremony, you can Rebel Assault, you can do all the other different fun little Rebel things. General Tadana, another really good card that's used with this guy. Make him a 4/6. Jeez. Regardless, the smuggle ability is going to be very interesting for this character because it's not an ambush and it's not attack with this unit. It is just ready, so you will have to do 2 separate actions to be able to attack, which means your opponent can respond. But maybe potentially what you can do with this is towards the end of a round, smuggle it in. When your opponent doesn't have much they can do, they either claim or just ignore it, and then you attack with your Cassian and get your stuff going. Fantastic unit, great art here. Love everything about this. Rebels stay winning. Our next preview comes by way of Unlimited FFG. This is our last leader for Shadows of the Galaxy. Once this is revealed, we know all the leaders. We technically know all the leaders already, but we know what they all do. So here we go. We have the final leader. It's Command Villainy. It's a rare. This is Jaba the Hut. His high exaltedness, Command Villainy, Underworld Hutt trait, action, exhaust, choose a unit. For this phase, it gains bounty. The next unit you play this phase costs 1 less. He flips on 7 into a 2/12. This is a rare, number 6 out of 262 in SHD. Leader side, when deployed, another friendly unit captures an enemy non-leader unit. And then the same text on the backside, exhaust the unit, choose a unit. For this phase, it gains bounty. The next unit you play this phase costs 2 less. So the leader ability actually is 1 resource better. The whole idea for Jaba is to say, hey, I want that guy, bring him to me, and then you bounty those things off to be able to get the benefits from them. So ideally, Jaba the Hutt's your first action of the turn, throw a bounty onto your opponent's units. Your next action is going to be eliminating that, and then your final action potentially of the sequence is to play your cheaper unit based upon what you have. So a Jaba the Hutt Command Aggression or Command Cunning is probably the way you're going to end up playing him a lot, unless you really want to focus on the Vigilance defeat events. But ideally, you're still running bounties, not potentially the super bounty leader, but more just I can generate my own bounties rather than having to rely on upgrades. And then when you flip, you get a capture, which is super cool. Unfortunately, Jaba the Hut himself can't capture the units, which is unfortunate given he's got 12 health. But if you can get those protections onto your other units, flipping on 7 into a 2/12 that captures and also can do the action to double bounty something or bounty 2 different units, can end up being a really good strategy for this leader. This probably is going to see a lot of play over Palpatine because he does come out earlier. He doesn't have as good attack stats, but he has better defense stats, and he can also fulfill the bounty condition of something utilizing this capture. So fantastic leader. I think this is going to be a very good leader. Lots of really good options for Command Villainy this set. Jaba is good, Gideon is good, Palpatine gets some better options, and then Tarkin gets a couple of extra Imperial units that are also really good. Command Villainy leaders themselves, at least, they're in a really good spot right now. Next up, we've got 2 previews coming by way of Unplayable. They are Jaba adjacent things, including a very similar ability to Fet's Fire Spray for this first unit, but we have a unit and an upgrade. Let's start with the unit. We have here Jaba's Rancor Patissa, an 8-cost Command Villainy ground unit, 9 power, 9 health, underworld creature traits. If you control Jaba the Hut as a leader or a unit, this unit gets 1 cost less to play, so 7 resources instead of 8. When played and on attack, deal 3 damage to another friendly ground unit and 3 damage to an enemy ground unit. This is an uncommon, number 91 out of 262 in SHD. Jaba's Rancor here, Patissa, is here to munch on things. Coming in for a 7 while Jaba is your leader is pretty good, especially for a 9/9. When played and on attack, being able to deal damage to your opponent's ground units is really good. And while this is better than Death Trooper, it is better simply because if Jaba's Rancor is the only unit you have on the ground unit, you do not deal damage to itself, because it does say another friendly ground unit. It bypasses some of the downsides that Death Trooper himself has, but still able to swipe at and deal some damage to your opponent's stuff, and also does it every time you want to attack. So be careful of your own units on the board. Maybe you shift this going into space until the Rancor is gone, but while the Rancor is here, it's chomping and eating and grabbing and hopefully not dying to a gate being smashed on its head, which you can see in the background there. Really interesting card, an uncommon rather than a rare, so this will probably slot as a 3 of in every Jaba the Hut deck because it fits. It's on aspect, it costs less, there's no reason not to. Next up, we have an expensive upgrade, but an interesting one. We have here Frozen in Carbonite. This is a 3-cost Cunning Villainy upgrade attached to a non-leader unit. Attached unit cannot ready. When played, exhaust attached unit. +0/+0, it's a condition. I believe this is 193 out of 262. I don't know why the image quality is so low. An uncommon in Shadows of the Galaxy SHD. Expensive, but effectively what this does is it completely negates one of your opponent's units until they either get rid of the upgrade or until it dies. Obviously, if it's a Sentinel, you're still going to have to attack it. If it's got big power, you're still going to have to clear it with units if that's the way you're going to do it. But otherwise, you just frozen and Carbonite one of your opponent's units, and it doesn't ready basically ever until they destroy the upgrade. And much like the No Good to Me Dead, which is a very similar thing, freezing something in Carbonite, nothing you can do can ready that unit. Fantastic upgrade here. Again, expensive, but it is an uncommon, so it can be more prevalent. I think the combination of No Good to Me Dead and Frozen and Carbonite is really going to tilt people pretty hard when it comes to playing against Cunning Villainy decks, more so than Boba Fett already does. But given the combo of those two events and upgrades together, we'll see how this ends up affecting the overall strategy of you just can't do anything decks. Next up, we've got 2 previews by way of DragonriderTCCG over on Twitter and YouTube. Link in the description below to that post. We have a unit and an event, another double single aspect units. Let's start with that one first. We have here Sugi, Hired Guardian, 4-cost double vigilance ground units, 4 power, 6 health, Underworld Bounty Hunter traits. While an enemy unit is upgraded, this unit gains Sentinel, Smuggle, 6 cost, only 1 vigilance icon. This is a rare, number 52 out of 262 in SHD. Sugi here is actually a fairly interesting unit that is protected against upgrade strategies for a certain period of time. It gains a Sentinel while your opponent's upgraded, but you could throw a bounty on one of your opponent's units to stall them for the round and then try to claim that bounty at the end of the round or not worry about it at all. Play one of the 0-cost bounties that can just be whatever. But the fact that you can smuggle this for 6 in a single vigilance means that you're not required to run double vigilance, or it's a 6-cost regardless of which way you play it if you're not in double vigilance. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up working. This is another Vigilance Bounty Hunter, so it works along the same lines of going with a Bounty Hunter package with Embo. But ultimately, you're hoping this unit is going to protect you against your opponent's higher level upgrade strategies with that 6 health and just be a roadblock while you can try to clear out either the upgrades themselves or your opponent's units on the board. Next up, we have a 0-cost event, which can get a little tricky. We have here Look the Other Way. This is a 0-cost Cunning Trick event. Exhaust a unit unless its controller pays 2. This is a common, number 227 out of 262 in SHD. The idea behind this is that you provide your opponents a choice of what's the worst thing that I can try to get away from. Do I either exhaust my unit or do I pay 2 so I can continue using my unit the way I want to be able to use it? If your opponent spends all their resources on stuff first and then does attacks, this card will do work because you just continue doing your attacks, and when they run out of resources, you look the other way, one of their units, they can't pay for it, and that's an issue. But if your opponent tends to attack first and then use their resources, you can look the other way to force them to either choose, do I get to play my strategy for the turn, or do I just continue doing what I'm doing with attacks and not worry about what I'm going to play for the turn? It's an interesting conundrum for people going up against this card. I imagine decks like aggro, this is going to hurt a lot because it hurts them both ways. Either you don't get to play your unit for the turn, or you don't get to attack with your unit for the turn. For a deck like Control, not as big of an issue. Mid-range, they can take it or leave it depending on the situation, but this is probably going to be pretty good sideboard tech depending on the matchup you're going against. Our next batch of previews come by way of Nerd of the Rings, 2 previews here. Link in the description below to their content. We've got a unit that is a double single aspect. We've got an event that is a single morality aspect. Let's start with the ground unit. We have here Bo-Katan Kryze fighting for Mandalore, a 2-cost double aggression ground unit, 3 power, 3 health, Mandalorian trooper traits. When defeated, for each player with 15 or more damage on their base, draw a card. This is an uncommon, number 157 out of 262 in SHD. For double aggression, the idea behind this is to allow it to refill your hand when you've done a bunch of damage to your opponent's base. If in the first couple of rounds, when this doesn't get defeated, you can knock up that 15 damage onto your opponent's base, or vice versa, they can do it to you. You can defeat this in some form or fashion by ramming it against the unit, or if your opponent defeats it, whatever the case may be, to draw a card for each base that has 15 or more damage on it. The problem I have with this card is, even though it's actually costed relatively well, 2 cost 3/3, we've seen a Battlefield Marine for that, we've seen Evazan for that. The big problem for me is the double aggression. And I think double aggression with this effect seems like it's actually very good, but is going to be problematic if you can't get this on the board and have it defeated at the right time. Your opponent's just going to defeat this before either player gets to 15 health if they can help it, which oftentimes they definitely can. Waylay this off the board and you don't even have to deal with the when defeated. I see where the design comes from, but ultimately I think that this is going to be on the lower end of playable 2-drops in double aggression as it stands. The event from this batch of previews is a famous event from Return of the Jedi. We have here No Bargain, a 3-cost villainy trick event. Each opponent discards a card from their hand, draw a card, a common number 244 out of 262 in SHD. 3 resources, you discard a card, I draw a card, end of conversation. That's basically what this card is going to end up being. This is nice for villain hand control. A lot of the villain hand control is random, or your opponent gets to choose, or a card is discarded and then they draw a card, which is not great. This is definitely one of those ones that even if your opponent gets to choose the worst card in their hand to discard, you still get to draw a card and you've still disrupted their hand, which is pretty good for a 3-cost event. I don't think that this is going to see a lot of main deck play unless your specific strategy is hand disruption or hand destruction, which right now aggression and cunning and heroism does a little bit or a lot better, but at least this is going to give villainy some form of hand control that they didn't necessarily have before this, as good as this card is. Next up, from Unlimited FFG Socials, everybody's favorite Star Wars Muppet. He's here to screech at you and be obnoxious. We have here Salacious Crumb, Obnoxious Pet. 1 cost command villainy ground unit, 1 power, 3 health, underworld creature traits. When played, heal 1 damage from your base. Action: exhaust this unit and return it to its owner's hand. Deal 1 damage to a ground unit. This is an uncommon number 08080 out of 262 in SHD. This is a relatively consistent loop with Lady Proxima. Lady Proxima starts on the board. It's a 0/4. You just got to protect it. Salacious Crumb comes into play, heals a damage off of your base if you have any damage. Lady Proxima planks your opponent's base, and then you can return this to your hand to deal 1 damage to one of your opponent's ground units, or just a ground unit. It's going to be one of your opponent's units. And then you play it again to get the extra ping. And that rotation, which you can do effectively 1 full rotation every turn, is pretty obnoxious. Then that's what this subtitle is, Obnoxious Pet. This is going to be a very interesting combo to see players utilize early on. This is another card that goes into Underworld decks that is very good. Cunning command, aggression command, vigilance, whatever you want to run. Salacious Crumb, Lady Proxima, 2-card combo that just rotates until one or both are killed. Our last creator previews, 2 of them, come by way of Hunter and Friends Brettspiele over on YouTube. Link in the description below to that video. 2 units. Both of them deal with Underworld stuff. Very interesting stuff we got going here. Let's get started. We have here Val Loyal to the end, 2 costs, Vigilance ground unit, 2 power, 4 health, Underworld trait, Bounty, deal 3 damage to a unit. When defeated, give 2 experience tokens to a friendly unit. The active player chooses the order of Val's abilities. This is a rare number 58 out of 262 in SHD. The reminder text basically tells you whoever defeats this unit will effectively get control of what order these happen in. So if Val is your unit and you kill her for an effect, whatever it may be, you can choose the when defeated or the bounty to go in whichever order. If your opponent does it, they choose whichever order is going to happen first, which is probably going to be the bounty first, then the when defeated. They don't choose where the experience tokens go, but they do choose the order in which it happens. But Val is a very good 2-cost 2/4 early on, sure, damage to a unit is going to be troublesome. You can end up losing 2 units for losing her, which is pretty risky for given the benefit you can get. But if you have a bunch of extra units that are on the board that aren't going to get defeated by 3 damage, or something has a shield on it, whatever the case may be, Val can end up pumping the experience tokens to another friendly unit based upon what you need to be able to use it for. Val, I think, goes really good into Finn, because you can give those experience tokens to another unit, and then Finn can defeat one of those to be able to give that unit a shield, and then you protect them from further shenanigans down the road. The second card from Hunter and Friends is just a generic villainy unit. We have here Hutt's Henchman, 4-cost villainy ground unit, 3 power, 4 health, underworld trait, shielded, a common, number 240, a 262 in SHD. If you need a 4-drop in Underworld and you don't want to use any of the other ones, this is a pretty good option. However, not a great constructed option. 3-4 for 4, not great stats. The shielded definitely does help. It is Underworld traded, so it can proc off of other Underworld stuff, but you have better Underworld things that can be run at 4. However, in Draft and Sealed, this card is nuts, because plugging off a shield is not as easy in the limited environment. Having a 3-4 for 4, again, not great stats, but probably better than what you're going to get on average with a draft pool. Because this is a common, you can get more of these in your pulls, whether it's sealed or draft, and just have a bunch of Hutt's henchmen on the board with shields, knocking down other units or just slamming at the doors of your opponent's base. I think this is actually a very good limited card, and will end up seeing a lot of play in that environment and not so much in the constructed / premier environments. Twin Suns, though, when you do need a bunch of 4-drop on Underworld units, Hutt's Henchman. And that is all the available official previews for Shadows of the Galaxy. Preview season is actually wrapped up this week, because as of Friday, most of the places that were receiving their orders of product have received them, and there have been a couple of stores that have been opening up boxes themselves to sell singles on the secondary market. I was considering going over those specifically. There's only like 1 or 2 cards there that I think are going to be super impactful, but ultimately the low quality images that come through on some of these is not a great way to showcase those cards. So eventually, when those come up, we'll go through them on the aspect reviews if there's anything super significant. But like I said, there's only about 2 cards, DJ and a space unit, that I think have interesting designs for what Set 2 is trying to do. We can talk about those specifically when we get to them and we have good quality images of them. But as it stands right now, Shadows of the Galaxy is basically fully spoilered, fully previewed at this point. Not fully previewed, but you understand what I mean. Lots of fun stuff here. I enjoyed going over these cards a lot, much like I did with Spark of Rebellion. Shadows of the Galaxy looks to be a really cool set that has a lot of fun thematic things and a lot of powerful mechanics, while also a little bit more involved to figure out what is going to be good. So as we move through leader, quote unquote, reviews, move through aspect reviews, all those other different things, we'll talk about the super strengths of some of the most important things. We'll talk about what could have the most potential, and that this time I'm actually going to skip things that I don't think are good, mainly because I've either talked about them already or that's not relevant to what you, the viewer, is looking for in terms of what they want to play, because you already know what you don't want to play. You want to know what you do want to play. So that's it. We're done. Final Shadows of the Galaxy preview video complete. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me on this lovely journey we've had so far. It feels like it's been 2 weeks, but it's been like a month and a half. So should be very interesting going forward. I'm excited for the pre-releases. I'm excited for the full set release on July 12th. Should be fun cracking those boxes and so on and so forth. If my order gets fulfilled the way that it's supposed to, I will have a full case to open on July 12th. We're going to do a Twitch live stream, and then I'm going to transfer those into YouTube VODs for all you lovely VOD viewers. But join me, follow me on all my social medias at RybackStun, everywhere you can find me, so that way you can get the information on when that stream is. Otherwise, like and comment on this video, subscribe to this channel for all of your Star Wars Unlimited needs. You know how to support me in case you want to do so. And thank you very much again. I've said it a lot, but I'm gonna say it again. Thank you for joining me on this lovely preview season. We'll be back again with a leader review, quote unquote, as the start of the true analysis of Shadows of the Galaxy with the whole set available. And with that, I will see you in the stars.